I'm unlovable. There's something wrong with me. I'm powerless, constantly feeling in danger. And with that belief, there can often be this behavior, this drive to keep proving I'm enough or I'm good enough.
These beliefs that form earlier in life really fuel us as adults, even though it's not helpful. Michelle Gay is a respected therapist and educator in the mental health field who specializes in trauma therapy through her private practice, Ripple Effect.
We're all designed to be able to process information. We have an experience about something, and trauma is that experience that hasn't been processed, that remains in our nervous system.
Change is possible even on a bigger level if someone wants it.
It's helpful and important to know that when you heal, you also start to
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Kassim Al-Mashat. I'm thrilled to share today's conversation with Michelle Gay. She is a highly experienced trauma therapist, educator, and leader in the mental health field. She's the owner of Ripple Effect, a private practice in Victoria, BC, Canada, where she specializes in complex trauma therapy, guiding individuals through profound work of healing and transformation. She's also a certified EMDR therapist, which stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. We'll talk about that as well. And she's an EMDRIA approved consultant, which is the International Association for EMDR. However, her expertise extends beyond EMDR, encompassing ego state therapy, internal family systems, IFS, which is gaining a lot of popularity nowadays, and somatic interventions. All the essential interventions in working of complex trauma and disassociation. Michelle, a warm welcome to you to the Pause to Elevate podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here today, Chasm.
Thank you so much for joining us. You have such a fascinating career that's really spans into education, international work, therapy, and I wonder what began this journey? Like, what led you to have an
Mm.
interest in doing trauma work?
For me, I think it's not just a career choice. It wasn't.
Mm.
It was something that I felt when I was very little, very young, pulled towards more of like a calling. I remember when I was about 10 years old, and I used to play in the basement, and I lined up all my stuffies, and I
Mhm.
pretended I had the blackboard behind me, and I was pretending to teach them bed mess. And I really connected with that teacher part of me,
Mm,
and I wanted to begin and go into teaching, and all the while really feeling this pull towards counseling and
mm,
therapy. But I felt that I wanted experience too, life experience. So I went out
mm,
for 10 years or so after I graduated, and from my degree in sociology and anthropology. And
mm,
I traveled. And as I gained that life experience, I felt pulled towards going back to school. I think a big
mm,
part of it also is navigating my own trauma growing up. That,
mm,
and as you, I think, navigate your own trauma developmentally, it doesn't always appear in ways that you might think it does. And for me, I really learned in my own youth and childhood to really attune to people, to pay attention to people's emotions and their
mm,
states. And so that put me over time in a natural place of caregiving and
mm,
supporting. And so that, and over time, also realizing that my own disconnects around myself and how certain experiences had impacted me led me to really
mm,
wanting to go into counseling, offering a space that felt safe for other people to come to, and also offering services that would really work, that
mm.
really provide change and really get to the heart and root of change. And so it led me to EMDR and IFS and somatic work.
Mm. Yeah, even how you're saying it just reminded me, like, really, we are in the business of change. Like, it's change and creating healing and supporting healing and providing conditions for healing.
Yes.
And it's so wonderful to hear about your journey because it's really tough to be in this field if we haven't done our work. And you've clearly done your work
Yes.
on yourself because the more we know about ourselves, the more we can be with others. It's actually
Mhm.
easier because this is not easy work. Like the work that you're doing is not easy work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think to show up for people and for their healing process.
Mm,
You need to have done some of your own work, and I think it's so important to also be doing your work ongoingly. I think
mm,
we're humans, and there's different kinds of experiences that are going to happen in the therapy process that are going to get us in touch with our own wounds. And
mm,
so to be able to continue to work through whatever it is that is your history and your past and your wounds to be able to provide, I think, a space for people to work through their healing.
mm. That's really so important because sometimes people think, oh, if someone is a therapist or counselor or psychologist, oh, they got it all figured out and they
Mhm.
don't go through stuff. And I'm like, oh, no, I go through stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, and I have to keep doing my work
Yes.
because things, happen in life. Like just like any other human being, things are going to show up and things are going to activate us and touch onto the past. And, new challenges show up in life for all of us. So
Mhm.
we're human too. Uh,
Mhm.
and takes courage what you're saying on both ends for clients, patients, depending what the setting is, to be willing to do this work, this counseling work, and for the therapist takes courage to be in a place of pain and vulnerability.
Yeah, I think so too. I think part of trauma is, there's a natural kind of avoidance that can come with moving into those difficult and painful feelings that can be
Mm,
there. And so to step into that uncertainty and that pain and to I once saw an image of healing. It's not this straight linear line, but it's like going around this way and around that way. And really to step into that kind of process and to stay with it for, I think, sometimes, especially with complex trauma, it can take years to really start
mm.
to feel some stability and healing. And so to stay with that, it takes a lot of courage.
I love how he did that. Those of you who are just listening, the audience instead of YouTube, using your hand to kind of wiggly lines up and down and circle. And sometimes, you're right. We have an expectation it goes in a straight up line.
Yeah.
Give me two things, and I can
Yeah.
resolve everything, and it's finished. Right? Because we're in a culture of like, quick, give me two tips, give me five tips,
Yeah.
and it should be done by tomorrow.
Yes.
And we forget like healing doesn't happen just suddenly overnight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think
how do you work with that? I'm wondering with like
Mhm.
educating people.
Well, I think part of healing too, I think it's helpful and important to know that when you heal, I think you also start to make different choices in your
Mm,
life. And sometimes, healing isn't always about that things are difficult and then they feel good. Sometimes different choices come with healing. We might choose or notice that certain relationships are are not healthy for us, or we might
mm,
notice we weren't wanting to do that job that we've been doing, or it's not satisfying us. And so I think with therapy those kinds of outcomes
mm,
can happen too. And so it can sometimes lead us to places that we make changes, big changes outside of our life. And I think
mm,
I talk about that too. I think there's a term in EMDR that's called secondary loss. And
mm.
so with change comes loss. And I think it's helpful and important to think about too as you're going through it. That is part of healing as well.
So even though there's some kind of, I don't know, the word blooming is coming to me like some
Mhm.
change, but the change also has some letting go of something. And
Yeah.
that is a loss. Like if someone's changing a relationship or career or moving or realizing needing to make some kind of decision. Not everything is just perfectly easy, but
Yeah.
that's change, isn't it?
It
It's
is. And when I got into counseling, I really wanted to choose. I mean, I think there is kind of different services out there, and some I think services teach to how to cope.
mm,
Teach those tools to manage emotions and to respond to yourself differently, which is really important experience and learning to have. I think those are often kinds of experiences that children get in childhood with
Mm,
caregivers who are attuned to that.
mm,
You know, and at the same time, my calling into counseling was about really helping clients change, really to feel sustainable, really letting go of wounds that aren't serving rather than coping, to have
right.
your life more fully, living
Mm.
in your life.
Mm. So I guess some of the distinction you're making, like there's so much coping we can do, it can be helpful, but you're talking more on a deeper level, creating change, not just
Mm-hmm.
covering up something or just continuing as is with coping a little better. But okay, change is possible even on bigger level if someone wants it. 'Cause sometimes people don't even realize that. Oh, change is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can be in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah, I think it's, life is, we have a life, and to be able to live that in a way that's purposeful and engaging and meaningful to each person. I think, that's part of my belief in counseling as a counselor, is to
mm,
provide space and to help people to connect to themselves in ways that they're living a life that they want and a life that they're choosing.
mm. And I guess as you're saying that, one of the first parts in getting to the life we want is seeing clearly the life we're in. Or like right, there's a waking up to like how it is now, and that can be uncomfortable. Even in mindfulness, and I teach mindfulness and
Ah,
mindfulness based stress reduction. It's like there's a
yes.
part when we start turning in, you're like, oh, I didn't realize I'm dealing with this feeling, or we can begin to see our life like, oh, there's a uh-oh. I don't
Yes.
not wanting
Mhm.
to go there, right? There might be that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is important for change, to be able to see, to take assessment, or to take in connection with yourself what it
Mm,
is you're doing and how it's impacting you.
yeah. There's something about authenticity, right? Like being
Hmm.
real of how it is.
Hmm.
This is just how it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. This conversation actually just remind me of a metaphor that a counselor told me. I don't know, maybe 30 years ago or something,
Hmm.
and that stuck with me. And we're talking about change, and I'm like, this is hard work. And he's like, just like a bud that's pushing through. It's pushing through to open up. Like it's gonna sometimes like, oh, imagine a bud pushing through. And I was like, oh, I just want to get to the end
Hmm.
of this thing. And but patience. It taught me a lot of patience. Just gotta trust the process and whatever someone is doing. Just that's hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think even in the counseling process or life process, can be so much uncertainty.
Mm,
And it can be very hard to have patience with uncertainty.
yeah. We want results.
Yes.
Quick results. Yeah. So I wonder if we can go back. We start talking about trauma, and just so listeners, we're all on the same page. Like, what is trauma, and why is it important to address?
Mhm. We're all designed to be able to process information. We have an experience about something, and then if we maybe see an accident or something happens, and after a couple of days, it can feel really vivid, and
Mm,
it can be impacting us. And as we talk about it, or as we make sense of it, we start to process that experience.
mm,
So and the intensity or the vividness of the experience can start to change because we're processing it. And we're all designed physiologically to do that. All of our systems are designed to do that. But when we have an experience that exceeds our capacity to process it, it's
mm,
overwhelming at the time, or maybe we didn't get the support. Certain ages that certain experiences can happen, and so when it overwhelms us, it gets stuck in our nervous system
mm,
in its raw form. So it gets stuck. With EMDR, we talk about it being stuck with the same beliefs at the time, the same emotions, and where we felt that. And it doesn't go away. It's not something our nervous system holds on to that, and often those things then that are similar that we experience later in life can get attached to that.
mm.
So then when we have experiences later, we will feel these sensations come up, and it can be really confusing. And
Mm.
so trauma is that experience that hasn't been processed, that remains in our nervous system.
I really love that description, and it remind me of Peter Levine. I read something that
Mm.
he spoke about in all his work in trauma. How trauma is not in the event, but it's in the nervous system, and
Yes.
it doesn't take away. It's not
Mhm.
about making event right or wrong, but something
Mhm.
happens. But trauma is what's kept in the nervous system.
Mhm.
And that's what seems to catch up with us when it's unprocessed. And I guess, what do you see with unprocessed trauma? Like, some people go, why do I have to address like things from the past? I don't want to look in the past. I just want to look to the future. Sometimes in
Mhm.
our culture is
Mhm.
very like
Yes.
toxic positivity. Let's just be positive
Mhm.
here and look at the. So what would you say to someone who's thinking like, why would I even want to look at my past? It was painful. I forget that. I guess, when
Yeah.
is it an issue?
Mhm. I think it's always an issue
Mm,
in some ways. I think that, there's some people talk about as reliving. Those can be flashbacks, or those can be panic, or those can be the trauma in a way that it feels like it's happening and we're re experiencing. So we might have those moments when there are reminders in the environment. And that's really obvious, and that's very
mm,
clear. That's how it's impacting us. But I think, too, when we don't process our trauma, I think our nervous system we have what Dan Siegel talks about as a window of tolerance. And
mm.
so within that window, there's hyper arousal at the top and hypo at the bottom. Within that, we're bouncing around in a day when we have experiences that are stressful, and we might move up a little bit and down. But over time, when we're not clearing our trauma or processing events that have been stuck in our nervous system, that window gets narrow. And I think
Uh,
it can come back to what we were talking about, choosing what you want in your life. If over time your window gets more narrow and narrow, the choices we make in our future, the choices that we make, how we might decide to make new friends or connect with people or try something different as we get older, our capacity to do that, to handle the stress, and to
mm,
make choices that continue to sustain our life and create joyful life, get
mm,
more narrow. So I think whether we're feeling it in the moment and feeling those relivings and those reminders, or making less choice, that less capacity to enjoy life. I think it's
mm,
really important that we address our trauma.
mm. So there's the window of tolerance, as you're saying, the window is getting smaller, there's less enjoyment of life, and how much it affects on a relational level, like relationships, whether it's family, whether it's intimate, whether it's work. Like, there's an impact of trauma on, because there's a relational component to trauma.
Absolutely.
And it's
Mhm.
sometimes people don't realize how much is interfering in relationships.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, I think even, if we think of trauma on a spectrum, and as
Mm,
it goes, there might be, we have PTSD and experiences that have impacted the nervous system and remain unprocessed. And then, at the other far end of the spectrum of complex trauma,
mm,
it's those relational experiences that I think start really early
mm,
and can be so absolutely confusing to try to understand why relationships don't work out or what the disconnects are, because of
mm.
how cumulative it is, and how complicated it can get when trauma is unprocessed.
And you were talking about that range. So,
Mm.
what is complex trauma for those who are not aware of, like basic trauma versus complex
Yes.
trauma?
Yeah, complex trauma, it can happen anytime. It's about being in a experience of a prolonged exposure to feeling
Mm,
powerless, and I think with little solution. And it's most common that that happens in childhood, and for different reasons. There's not always, there's intergenerational trauma that can set up family
right.
systems in a certain way where caregivers can't respond to children in ways that they need, and to be very attuned to children to help them experience themselves in the world.
Mm,
I talk to my clients often about the idea of the biological paradox.
mm.
And so that is that we're hardwired to attach. And that's just the way our nervous systems are. And when we're born, we are designed to connect with our caregivers and our caregivers with
Right.
us. But when that doesn't happen for different reasons, and I think even sometimes chronic health, and there can be complex reasons why that doesn't happen. But the baby's still stuck with this situation of being hardwired to seek comfort and
Mm,
protection from their caregiver. And when that caregiver is also the source of the anxiety or the stress or the pain, it leaves them with a biological paradox.
mm,
There's an impulse to drive towards that person for protection and comfort and safety. And yet there's also a drive away because they're also the source of
right.
what's happening. And so with complex trauma, it's that I think that's a big part of the development is that biological paradox and the confusion that comes with that and what people internalize about themselves to be able to adapt to that situation where there isn't a solution.
Mm. How you're sharing it too, it just made me think of like having, a gas pedal and the brakes on at the same time, like wanting to turn to but also turn away from both. That's the paradox, like wanting,
Mm-hmm.
needing that connection but not trusting that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I think that can do is it sets up a nervous system that is in survival mode.
Mm,
And then there's little reprieve to relax, to find connections of safety or connections of trust growing up. So it's a nervous system that also can't process or take in beautiful moments growing up. There's little ability because that window is so narrow.
So it really helped us kind of expand our understanding of trauma, complex trauma, because sometimes people think, oh, trauma is just like one massive event that has to happen. And they go, I
Mhm.
didn't have a massive event or I didn't go through war. And many people like have, but not everyone has gone through a big event. So I guess what are, just to help listeners understand, like what are different forms of trauma, like events that cause? So,
With complex trauma and I think that example of the biological paradox that when children are in developmental phases, there isn't the same abstract thinking, or there isn't the same sort
mm,
of reasoning that happens later in life with the brain. So a lot of what children are experiencing are really based in emotions and nervous system.
mm,
And what can start to happen in that kind of experience is that it's even scarier to think about or to know the reality of this situation is not safe for me. This
mm,
is not a source of protection or comfort, and this is my life. And so different beliefs about self can start to form.
mm,
A lot of those beliefs being, I think, shame based, feeling there's something wrong with me or I'm unlovable. So that's what starts to set up a nervous system for more
mm.
complex trauma and difficulty to connect with other people.
Hmm. So this happens with complex trauma, and you were saying earlier as well how beliefs somehow get infused with that experience earlier on in childhood. So
Mm-hmm.
negative in EMDR we call negative cognitions, negative beliefs, and you listed a couple. What other beliefs do people typically have? Whatever range of trauma, whether it's complex or the little T, often said, or the big T trauma, the bullying that might happen, or the abandonment or rejection, or the abuse. Like it's such a range. But what are the different beliefs?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I think some of those ones common in complex trauma are those like I'm unlovable, there's something
Mm,
wrong with me, I'm powerless, I'm in danger, constantly feeling in danger.
mm,
I think some common ones, even on that range and that spectrum, I think even where there isn't that exposure maybe to the biological paradox, but other things can happen in school.
mm,
In I think conditions that I think of my own son who has ADHD, and part
mm,
of that coming with anxiety. And I think there can be a lot of different ways that beliefs get internalized. But one common
mm.
one that I see in my office is I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And with that belief, there can often be this behavior, this drive to keep proving I'm enough or I'm good enough. And
Mm,
So life can get set up in a way that, I've got to do this accomplishment and then I'm good enough. And I've got to have
Mm.
this job and then I'm good enough. But what doesn't change is the belief. The belief is still the same. And so then the drive and the movement towards proving that is something that continues.
So it's amazing how much these beliefs that form earlier in life really fuel us as adults. Like I guess sometimes it's hard to imagine, but it's amazing how these beliefs form for circumstances, conditions. Here we are as adults, kind of still having those beliefs.
Yeah. And I think at the time, I mean, our nervous systems, I think, are incredibly wise. And there's so much source of wisdom there. And at the time that they do develop, is a way to adapt to the situation that's happening.
Mm.
If there isn't a source of protection or comfort, and if you were to believe I'm enough or I'm good enough, would be more painful than to internalize something that says I'm not good enough.
So the I'm
Mm.
not good enough belief in a way ends up in a negative way, helping a person make sense of their world. Like these bad things happen, or I got rejected, or whatever. Oh, I must be not good enough. In a way, it provides some kind of meaning, even though it's not helpful.
Yes. And that's why, it comes back to, I think, the therapy, because those beliefs are changeable, because they're
Mm,
not true. And so coming back to EMDR and being able to process
mm,
events and experiences that felt like it makes that true is part of what can challenge those beliefs and be able to create a different experience of oneself that is
mm.
closer to the truth.
That's something that personally I've experienced EMDR, and that's one of the
Mhm.
things that got me really excited to learn it and share it to my clients. But there's something about it that creates change on a deep level. And I'm wondering, from your experience, first of all, what is EMDR? Why does it help with changing these beliefs?
Yeah, it's a therapy that was created in the 80s by Francine Shapiro
Mm,
and has changed over time to she originally developed it as a technique,
mm,
but started to understand memory and history and negative beliefs and that it's more complex and we can address more. And so she developed what is called the 8 phase protocol,
mm,
and so there are different phases that we go through. I think commonly thought that the eye movements are what EMDR is, but it's actually really starting out by getting to understand the client and the experiences that they've had, and then moving into helping the client with their window of tolerance, being able to some of those coping that we talked about, and
mm,
being able to learn about emotions. And at when the client is ready, and it's individual for everyone in terms of how long that process might take.
mm,
When we get to a point and we start to work with memories, so EMDR is really addressing that state dependent information, those memories that have not been processed yet.
mm,
And it helps us to reprocess that. So we bring that together with something called bilateral stimulation, which is commonly thought of as the eye movements,
mhm,
and we think about the memory, and we work through the nervous system will in its own way work through what it needs to work through to be able to process that.
mm. One of the things that I found quite amazing about EMDR, it's like a gentle form of exposure to an event that has happened in the past by creating a safe space. It's not about, sometimes people get concerned, like, is this like flooding? We just have to go back and relive. And it's really not just like a forcing of going back to something, but it's bringing up something
Mhm.
and just working through it. And but there's something on a somatic level, nervous system, and this is what I tell clients too. It's not because what I'm doing is special or EMDR is special. It's like the brain is amazing, and we're just
Mhm.
providing conditions for the brain to process something that kind of has been stuck all these years.
Mhm.
It's actually amazing that like this bilateral stimulation, like you said, the eye movement, and then people are keeping their mind on the event and they're sharing thoughts, feelings, sensations, and now they're getting exposed to it, feeling it, and then they can process it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I mean, it sometimes is so profound. I think sometimes working with clients when they come in and describe an experience that they've had, and to think about, sometimes I'm working with someone and I don't know how their nervous system is. It's so the kinds of things that they've experienced are so deeply painful. And but then you trust in the process, and
Mm,
you work with the memory and the bilateral, and you follow it, and it's so profound and incredible how the nervous system is just going to work through that and heal
mm. And what's amazing with that is you're sharing it
that.
too is it's not like the memory is going to be erased. It's not like we're erasing memories, but the charge from that event goes down. So
Yeah.
that's what's really helpful. So when someone can recall, I remember even for me, my experiences, like when I recalled some of the traumatic events, I can still remember them, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't give me this visceral like, ugh, can feel it in my chest and like tightness in my body, and just like I feel a charge, like, oof,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
it's that part went away, and it just left with just a memory. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to quickly thank you for stopping by and watching this content. It truly means the world to me that you're interested in creating positive change. I also want to invite you to join our amazing community. I have free events online about mindfulness, mindfulness based stress reduction, laughter, as well as retreats that you can do from the comfort of your own home. And are you ready for this? Self paced program that you can do about mindfulness and stress reduction. So you can join the newsletter below to stay up to date on all these goodies. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and press that button. It really helps me to keep this content going and reach out to more guests. Thank you so much again, and may you continue enjoying watching this episode.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't. I think it's our history and it's our story. Those
Mm,
are the things that have happened to us. And at the same time, I think EMDR helps to separate that it's already happened. It's
mm,
not, that's that reliving of I'm feeling like it's still happening and it's not happening. So
mm,
EMDR helps us to work through those feelings that we didn't get to have at the time, or make sense of, or make meaning of how it's impacted our lives,
mm.
and then how we want to be different in the world. And so EMDR helps us to, we still have those memories, we still have what's happened to us, but our nervous system knows it's no longer happening, it's in the past.
Yeah, so that's what shifts. And I guess, I remember from the training that I did with
Mm-hmm.
EMDR, it's like that really landed for me, and I understood it. It's like what's
Mm-hmm.
unprocessed
Mm-hmm.
past still alive in the present.
Yes.
And I was like, what? Oh no. All right. And sometimes it's like a what do you call it? Like a charcoal that's or just some like buried down in the sand, and you just gotta add a little flame to it and or
Yeah.
just fan it a little bit and it's gonna flame up, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we're designed to survive, and
Mm,
our nervous system is going to remember and hold on to those things that might have kept us safe in the past. And at the same time, if we don't process that it's over, it does that. The flame will ignite it,
yeah.
and we'll feel it.
But there's a phase in EMDR you're talking about.
Mhm.
It's like we're reconnecting, but it's also on a somatic level, and that's what I'm finding for me personally, and sharing with clients, the effectiveness, because it's not just cognitive, it's not just thinking about it, but it's feeling it on a visceral level, somatic level,
Mhm.
sensation level,
Mhm.
and it's amazing how the body remembers.
Yes. Yeah, it's incredible that it is just the way we're born with it. This body
Mm,
that is going to be able to make those connections. I think similar with positive sensation, though, too, and
mm,
positive experience. Those become what's talked about as adaptive experiences,
mm,
but those become ones that we also build on. If we have positive experience and connection, then we can feel safer and more confident in the world. And
mm.
I think too, our bodies are incredible and so wise.
Hmm. So really naming resilience. I mean, we all have
Mhm.
resilience. Sometimes we don't realize. So we've all had negative experiences and positive experiences, and you're naming some of the
Mhm.
resilience that's available
Mhm.
that we don't see. Yeah. You're talking about beliefs, so we're talking about
Mhm.
negative beliefs,
Mhm.
and with EMDR, there's also bringing, we call it positive installation, kind of
Yeah.
bringing in these positive beliefs. And can you say a little bit about that? Because sometimes in this day and age, there's like, oh, just be positive and
Right.
just think positive thoughts. But this is not about just like some positive affirmation. And I'm sure all of these things are
Mhm.
wonderful, but this is not just about wishful thinking. So,
It's
what happens with positive, and what are some examples that counter the I'm not good enough, or I'm a failure, I'm a disappointment, I don't deserve love, all the negative beliefs people form?
Mhm. Yeah, when we think of the reprocessing phases of a memory, there is the desensitization, which is when we think about the negative belief in the experience.
Mm,
And then installation is when we think about the positive. So often the positive is the antidote or the opposite of whatever the negative was. So if it is, I'm
mm,
not good enough, when we move into that phase of reprocessing a memory and we think of the positive, I am enough,
mm.
we work on installing that. And I think that's important. What you're saying is because it's not something that you can just say is true. It's something that you also have to feel is true.
Right, right.
And that can take time, even as we're adding with the bilateral and processing the positive belief against the memory. I mean, sometimes it takes a significant amount of time for the nervous system to really to work through what it needs to work through to be able to believe that's true.
Mm. See, this is it. So it's not about no, no, no. Just believe it. Just believe it.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
like it's people, and that's actually a normal phase in EMDR. People like, I don't believe it. So like on a
Yes.
scale of even 1 to 7, 7 is I believe it. One, I don't. It's a one. I do not believe I deserve good things. I don't believe
Mhm.
it, but I want to
Mhm.
believe it. But
Yeah.
I don't believe it. And that's actually such a good, healthy
Yeah.
part of the change is we're starting where, however, you're actually believing, and then we're strengthening it in the
Mhm.
EMDR therapy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something we can't work around what our nervous system is truly experiencing.
Yeah.
If our brain and our body do not feel it's true, then it's as much as we might want it to be true, it's not going to be true until we feel it's true.
Yeah. So then sometimes people ask as well, like, so how long is it going to take? Is this one session? Is it two sessions? I'm sure you get that a lot. What do you tell
Yeah,
people who are starting EMDR or interested in therapy? Like, how long is this going to take?
yeah, it's a hard question because I think it also comes back to, how long do you stay in therapy? Because there's, we can, with EMDR, there might be certain, we might be addressing the car accident or we might be addressing,
Mm,
if we're working with more complex trauma. What I tell clients is that there's maybe conditions that create likelihood of time. And so initially I'll start to talk about, the kind of experiences in developmentally that when there's been a lot of connection
mm,
and feeling connected to even by grandparents or other kinds of people, teachers, having a lot of positive enough experiences,
mm,
also being able to work with your emotions, being able to feel them, to experience them, to be able to talk about ourselves. Those kinds
mm,
of conditions would create a likelihood that the processing is going to go more quickly
mm.
than someone who might have not had those kinds of experiences of support and care and maybe having done counseling in the past. So I often let clients know the likelihood of how long something's going to take depends on a few different factors.
Mm. And it depends. Like sometimes a memory is processed in one session, sometimes memory is not processed in multiple sessions. So,
Yeah.
and there's, I get this off people like, give me the exact timeline. Like,
Mhm.
and especially, and it's not easy, if someone has,
Mhm.
some coverage and they're like, I only have 3 sessions left this year.
Mhm. Mhm.
Can we get through all of it? It's like, ooh, I don't, we can't force healing here, but we can
Yeah.
get as far as we can get.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's a really complicated place to be for both
Yeah.
the clinician and the client.
Yeah. But you know what I found, and I wonder if you found that too. I found this amazing with EMDR compared to other intervention in counseling, is if we've worked on some memory with EMDR,
Mhm.
and someone wants to take a break or their coverage ended, and they come back 3 months, 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, it's like we can just pick up exactly where we left off, and
Mhm.
I find that amazing. Like the nervous system, even when I ask clients like, what number is this challenge at? How distressing is it? It's like, wow, it was like we left at the same number. Like
Yeah.
as a year later,
Mhm.
it's like the mind. That's amazing. Do
Mhm.
you see that too?
Mhm. Yeah, that I mean, you can work with certain memories for a period of time, and what happens after clients leave session, and whether that's a week or 3 months or six months. There's a way with the protocol that we can come back to the work that we were doing and to reevaluate and to check in on, and what's there is going to be there, and what's changed is also going to have
Yeah,
changed.
yeah. And that happens too, actually. Now that you say that,
Yeah.
it's so true. Like sometimes
Yeah.
people are like, this thing doesn't bother me anymore. Like,
Yeah.
and they bring up like, we ended like high distress, and then next thing we know, it's like, this is how come this is not, and they get puzzled sometimes. Like how come this
Mhm.
doesn't? This is supposed to be really bothering me. It's not bothering me anymore. Well, good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Often in consultations, when I provide
Mm,
consultations, part of, I think, when therapists are first learning EMDR, there's a that okay, so how do I come back to this? Like, if this is what happened at the end of session, so how am I
mm,
going to come back to that the next time we meet? And I think the beautiful experiences in EMDR is that we're not coming back to the content. We're coming back to what is still unprocessed in the nervous system,
right.
and the nervous system can do some changes between that end of session and the next time we see a client.
Mm, yeah. So well put. Yeah. Thank you. So no, we've been talking about EMDR. I wonder, the other interventions, and then I want to just speak a little bit about it because people have questions. Is internal family systems, and people are hearing more about it in social media. Like, celebrities are naming it. It's like, what is internal family systems, and how do you use it?
Mhm. Yeah, it's I think the idea that we are all made up of parts. Our personality is not. I'm not just this one way of being, or I'm not just this one way of being, but we're actually made up of multiple ways of being.
Mm,
And in IFS, and I think many therapies, I think even EMDR, there's this beginning position
mm,
that we are love and we are connection, and we have great capacity to be in that present oriented space of love and curiosity and kindness. And so we take that stance, I think, with in IFS, but in any therapy, and
mm,
then we start to work with the different parts that are not connected to that.
mm,
In ego state therapy as well, we talk about those parts as maybe trauma oriented parts that are still stuck in the time and the place of what happened.
mm,
And in IFS as well, the parts that are not connected yet to self and to that love. And so with the IFS, it's really a process of working with clients to build that self, to part connection, and then to what they call unburden. And
mm,
in EMDR, it might be those state dependent, unprocessed experiences,
mm.
the burden of what the nervous system is holding. And then you work with the client with the parts to be able to unburden that.
Mm. And what are some example of some parts? So it's a part that was hurt, or the parts what are just
Yeah, there's, I think, multitudes. They talk about nested systems as well. There can be
mm,
so many parts within, and clusters of parts around, as you start to move into the system and start to work with parts.
mm,
There's often young parts that still are burdened by experiences that have happened growing up. There can be, I think, for therapists, there can be helper parts, and
mhm,
helper parts can feel a lot like the the self. It can feel a lot like it's kind and curious, and at the same
Mm.
time, it's a part with a kind of agenda or a kind of desired outcome.
Mm.
There can be, they talk about manager parts. There's parts of our personality that help us to be able to live our life and to be able to have certain maybe perspective or philosophy in a way that
Mm.
helps us to move through different society, culture, and systems.
See, that brings awareness to, what's driving us. Like, is the helper part kicking in? Like, okay, what am I thinking? What am
Mhm.
I doing here? And we all have some kind of autopilot.
Mhm.
And what I find so helpful in doing this work is, like, looking in, like, oh, what am I thinking? Like, what is my pattern here? Is it helping? And without shaming or putting down something, it's more like, is it helping? Like,
Mhm.
what is my default? And is it serving what I'm needing? Is it not? Because we learned these parts for a reason. They helped
Mhm.
us,
Mhm.
but maybe not anymore.
Yeah, I mean, often our parts are, that in IFS they talk about forced into a certain role.
Mm,
So certain things might have been happening at a certain time in life, and maybe that part that is super responsible, was forced into that role at the age of 7, and
mm,
so then that part disconnects from the self and doesn't realize that they no longer have to do that. But
mm.
because it's the awareness of that part that it is present day, or that 14, 15 years have passed since that time, isn't yet there. So with IFS, it's really helping those parts become aware of that.
Such a process of self-discovery and learning and growing, and that's one of the things that really led me to this field. Is just like, just
Mm.
it's an ongoing ocean. Like, there's so much learning to do, whether it's as a
Yeah.
client or as a
Yeah.
practitioner, like as a
Mm-hmm.
provider. Like, there's so much to learn, and I find that exciting myself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's always something to learn
Yes.
about ourselves
Yeah.
and supporting clients learning. Yeah. So I'm wondering. There's a couple other things, and this conversation has gone pretty quick. But I do have two more questions, if it's okay. And one of them is, I wonder if you can share um, an example of change or transformation with this
Mm-hmm.
work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, every day, I think there's change and transformation with, that I see in using EMDR with clients. Things can change so quickly
Mm,
in the therapy process. I think one case that really impacted my practice and my trust in the process as well
mm,
is when I worked with a little child who was referred to me about the age, he was under 2, and he had been
mm,
through a couple of surgeries. He'd been through 4 surgeries and had woken up in the middle of a surgery,
mm.
and it was terrifying for him. And
Wow.
yeah, so they had to put the rest of the surgeries on hold, and so the parents had gotten in touch with me, and
Mm,
we set up the EMDR. I talked about it with them and helped them to understand the process and work with the bilateral. The parents, I brought them in as kind of co-therapists and in
mm,
working with the bilateral. And this child was able to process the experiences of being under the age of 2 in surgery, and was able to go back to the hospital. The child's,
wow.
he is part of his development, needs ongoing surgery, and so was able to go back and to be relaxed and to be able to stay overnight and to be able to approach the doctor. So all of
Mm.
these things that were quite terrifying at one time changed.
And this was at what age doing the EMDR?
He was about 2.5 when we
So
started
was
the work.
actually at 2.5. That's amazing. So could start
Yeah,
at that early.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Because I
Mhm.
don't work with a younger population, so I find that it's quite fascinating at that early.
Yeah, that the
Yeah.
nervous system can internalize and, I mean, feel unsafe or internalize those beliefs so early, and
Mm.
that you can change, that you can address it, that it's a nervous system issue that you can clear and reprocess.
Yeah. And it's probably better to address it sooner like at a younger age. But
Mm.
if someone didn't get a chance to process something that has happened or something impacting them, anytime, it's never too late. Like this is the thing that we have to remember. It's never too late.
Never too late. Yeah.
Never too late.
Mhm.
Seeking the right support, someone in the area, like if someone's listening to this outside of British Columbia,
Mm.
they can't work with either of us, right?
Mhm.
So looking at your jurisdiction, but
Mhm.
it's important to get the right support, whatever age one is.
Mhm.
Change is possible. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm wondering, just before we end, the name of this podcast is Pause to Elevate Podcast, Pause to Elevate. So, what does pausing mean to you, and how has it elevated your life? What types of pausing,
Mhm.
whatever? Just curious.
Mhm. Yeah, I was thinking about that before I'm coming on here. And when a couple of thoughts came to my mind, one of those was even, an EMDR where we stop and we say, take a deep breath, let it go.
Mm,
And what are you noticing here? And that pause there really is giving the client a moment for things to
mm,
catch up, for things to the nervous system to process, and for them to then pay attention to what's
mm,
happening in this moment, in that moment. And what I think is really beautiful about pausing to elevate and that idea of is that it is moment to moment, and that things,
mm,
if we stop and we take in the moment and just pay attention to the moment, how much can be changing, and how I think that those kinds of things that our brains might be carrying are not happening. So there's a moment to have some peace, I think, in the pause,
mm.
and a moment to notice what's happening, a moment to take in the beauty that's around us at any given moment
Right.
too.
And how about for you? Doing this work is we we're talking earlier. It's challenging, and what helps you take care of you?
Early on, I think when I began counseling, one key piece for me that was really important was to understand that counseling is, though it was a calling, and that I feel very privileged to work with clients and to
Mm,
be with process and healing. At the same time, for me to understand too that it's not who I am, that it's, that I am myself in other places, that I'm a parent, that
yeah.
I'm a dog owner, that I'm a
Mm,
wife, that I have these other, I'm an aunt, and to make sure that I'm connected to those people in those places, and living that part of my life too. So I think really early on, understanding that about coming into something that felt like a
mm,
call. I think taking care during the day, making sure that there's enough space, and taking time to transition, to breathe
mm,
through, to decompress after work as well. And I think
mm,
staying connected. I do my own counseling, and I'm also connected to my own mentors. And
right.
so having that support in this field, I think, is imperative.
Yeah, it is so important. The support, and talking about parts, like there's different parts of us. Like
Yeah.
you have, I know. Also, I wanted to ask you about that.
Mm.
Kilimanjaro. You had a part of you that did Kilimanjaro, all right? So you have some, like there's a part of you that loves this adventure. Like
Yeah.
that's and maybe help listeners know, like, where's Kilimanjaro for those of you who are not aware of it, and like what was that like?
Yeah.
Talk about
Kilimanjaro.
taking a pause to climb a
Yeah.
mountain.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an incredible. Kilimanjaro it's in Africa,
Mhm.
and it is the highest point in Africa. And I had wanted to. I When I started traveling overseas, I just fell in love with hiking, and that took
Mm.
me up Mount Fuji. So I climbed Mount Fuji,
Oh wow.
and I've did a lot of hiking in Nepal, the Annapurna Trek. I climbed Island Peak. It was my first experience with actual climbing, and
Mm.
then I went to Kilimanjaro, and I found it really cold. That was my. I found when I was in Nepal, there's a lot of other mountain ranges. So if you're hiking up, there's at least some barriers to the weather that can come in.
Mm.
Whereas Kilimanjaro is this freestanding mountain,
Right.
and it is cold. It's very cold when you're going up, but it's beautiful. It's an incredible gentle. I found a gentle incline, and
Mm.
to be at the top and to walk around the crater. I was driven too because they talked about the glacier melting over time, and so it was something that I just wanted to a moment in time to pause and to take
Mm.
in an incredible place in our world.
What an experience!
Mm-hmm.
You're getting me excited to go hiking now, right now. So,
Yeah.
but really taking these pauses to do small things in the day, a moment, a breath, or a
Mm-hmm.
bigger pause to go on some
Mm-hmm.
adventure.
Yes.
It's precious life, right? Sometimes we're
Uh,
just
mhm.
focusing on just one thing, but it's like there's so many things to be experienced in this life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, this has been so enjoyable and so informative. And I'm wondering, how can people reach you and learn more about what you're doing? I know you're doing not only provide counseling, but also consultation
Mhm.
and practicum. So, how can people reach you?
Yeah, I can be reached. I have a website.
Mhm.
My practice is called a ripple effect. So you can look that up and send an email. There
Mhm.
is also, uh, you can text, call, reach out, and send a message. I offer in the counseling, I offer regular sessions, but I've also been offering intensive. So those are longer sessions to really sit with the reprocessing. To
Mm.
sometimes when we have ongoing weekly sessions, there's lots of different life experiences that come up. And
Mm.
so with the intensives, it can allow us to just really focus in and work on those memories together, work with
Mhm.
children.
So,
And I'm,
it takes
yeah,
longer, intensive, just for folks to know. So more,
yeah,
instead of a typical 15-minute session, how long is an intensive?
it can be between 3 and 5 hours. That's what I've been
Mm.
offering. And often, as a baseline, 3 to 5 hours monthly. And
Mhm.
then from there, we either go up or down depending on the kind of work and how much clients want to work through.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I've
Yeah.
been offering those, and I'm a consultant as well. And so I offer consultation to help therapists become certified in EMDR and also become consultants.
Mm.
Like it makes such a difference to be able to feel confident and to have a place to really talk through things that are happening with clients, feel safe to name things that are happening in order to feel better and get better and to feel more confident in helping other people.
Mm. So I'll put all of that in the show notes, and so anyone who would like to reach out to you, they can find your information. Really, anything else on your mind before we end?
I think one thing that I was thinking of was just the question around culture. And
Mm.
one thing that had occurred to me was when I was in traveling during 9/11. So in that year, I was actually in Nepal
Oh.
when that happened, and I was actually in a meditation retreat.
Mm.
And I was in a Vipassana meditation retreat, and it had happened 2 days earlier before the end of it. And as I left the meditation retreat, I came into Kathmandu, and there was TVs, and there was a lot of
Wow.
filming and video footage of what had happened. And I had remember getting calls from family and friends. There's come back to Canada. There's
Mm.
this is happening. This is what's happening. And in the end, I chose to stay in Nepal,
Mm.
and I did the Annapurna trek, and it's a 3 week long trek, and you're
Wow.
disconnected from media. You don't have access to that. And what I found as I was walking through in the Himalayas was the conversation was very different. It was
Mm.
about, at that time, there was a conflict happening in Nepal, which eventually became a
Mm.
civil war with the Maoists and the government. And so the conversation in talking with Nepalese people was about that. That was their lived trauma at that time.
Right.
And so it really, as I was going through that time in my life, it really impressed on me that, trauma, it doesn't have boundaries, and there is no suffering that is, one is not greater than the other. And there is difficulty happening everywhere. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, because I think we can sometimes minimize or feel, my
Mm.
trauma. I hear some clients say, it's a sort of first class problem, or it's, but I think
Right.
suffering is suffering no matter where you are. And it matters. And to get help, because that help is there, and there is therapies that are designed to work with that.
Mm. So validating, and really normalizing just this, like, being human and of all our experiences, and if we can
Mm-hmm.
be there for each other, this is, we have a chance in this humanity
Mm-hmm.
to continue. So really want to thank you, for your wisdom, for just, and you have such a calming, soothing presence. Like, I can feel it through the screens. Can only imagine what it's like in person. Really appreciate you, appreciate the work you do, and all the change that you're supporting in the world. And I want to thank all the listeners for listening and watching. If you found this helpful and useful, feel free to share, like, and subscribe. If you haven't, may your moment be filled with ease, and may you be present in as many of them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hello there, and thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful, and if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.